Hi, welcome. Welcome back. And thank you for continuing on this journey together. I hope you have had a good week and that it has been filled with experiences of comfort, of delight, of intrigue, even of adventure. This past week, I actually made a stab at cleaning up my home office, a project that has been waiting for me and making me feel totally incompetent for a very long time. In the course of going through papers and papers and papers, with far more still waiting for my attention, I came across this quotation from Professor Michael Walzer of Princeton University. We are commanded to remember, not for the sake of the past, but for the sake of the future. We are commanded to remember, not for the sake of the past, but for the sake of the future. I am finding his wisdom a very helpful frame through which to understand and gain perspective on my current experience of loss and mourning. At the risk of trying your patience with continuing to share my personal story, I would confess that this time of Shloshim, the 30 days following the burial of a loved one, is deceptive. There are stretches of time when I don't think about my father or his passing, when my thoughts are filled with everyday, normal, ordinary things. And then, for some reason, I will think about my next visit to Chicago, and I am brought up short. For the first time in my life, I no longer have a parent in Chicago, my childhood home, and thus my primary purpose for visiting no longer exists. As a corollary to the emotional surprise of no longer having that impetus, I no longer have a ready place to stay either. I always stayed at my parents' home. Wherever they lived was my Chicago home. I know that I touched on this last week, but I am finding the loss of both person and place to be particularly poignant. And I am wondering if any of you have had similar reactions. I am realizing that my parents' home, no matter how old I was, or how independent, or how involved in my own life, my parents' home was always safe, a place to regress, to collapse, to let go of my responsibilities for a few short, blessed days. Their home was always open, always available, always welcoming. I think I slept my deepest sleep under their roof. It was the place where I could break to breathe before I even knew what that was. Speaking of which, why don't we do that right now? Let's take our first break to breathe at least, and then we will continue. So let us find our best places for meditating, our best positions, and putting our feet on the floor or as close to the floor as we can reach. Let us plant them firmly, and let us take an inventory from the very tops of our heads and try to release the tensions we might find there. Let's try to wiggle our ears, relax our jaws, relax our smile muscles. That's hard to do. Every now and then during the day, I try to do that, and it's not easy. Scrunch up our shoulders, and let our arms hang, our wrists circle around, and let us let go from the inside, those digestive tracts that receive so much punishment from us, especially around holidays. And then let us let go of our lower backs, our hips and our legs, our thighs, our knees. Speak about punishment. Our lower legs, our calves. Perhaps we can twirl our ankles, shake out our feet, wiggle our toes. And then let us softly close our eyes or gaze at something very near but nondescript. And let us take that first deep, healing, comforting breath, filling up all the spaces we just released, from the tops of our heads to the tips of our toes. Filling, filling, filling. Feeling almost almost blown up like a balloon, almost well, feeling expanded, actually, certainly. Feeling expanded as far as we can expand the limits of our bodies. And then when we are sure we have reached every corner, let us release. Then allow any remaining tensions to go out with the breath. Go out into the world. Go out into nothingness. And let's do it again. And if you are breathing at a different pace, just do so. It's fine. It's fine. You might use some of the images that I'm evoking, but whatever works for you. We breathe in again. Just thinking about that breath coming in and reaching all of the blood vessels, all of the organs, all of the internal workings of our bodies that depend on that breath to function. We draw it in, we feel it. We might imagine it just moving inside. Let us not forget to fill our backs with that breath. Even to imagine it going into the backs of our heads. And then all the way down through our legs into our feet. And then to let it go. And by thinking of this breath, by focusing our attention only on the inhalation, on its life inside our bodies, and then its release, we are in this moment and this moment only. I know that I was lucky. I know that others have and had far more difficult, conflictual relationships with their parents. I know that there are many relationships with parents that are not safe, are not welcoming, and do not constitute brief retreats from reality. My relationship was not perfect by any means. There were conflicts and disagreements. There could be tensions and differences of opinion. In general, however, I enjoyed a rich and rewarding relationship with both of my parents that makes this time bittersweet, nostalgic, and ripe for the process of sorting through their ongoing, enduring, and profound influence on my life. This process actually began in a very tangible way at the conclusion of the second Seder this year. My parents' three remaining children, all of their grandchildren, and all of their great-grandchildren returned to Chicago after the funeral and their house for the Seders. At the conclusion of our second night, my Chicago-based brother announced that we all needed to go through the house and claim what we wanted because the house needs to be sold. He needed to know that whatever we left behind, he could dispose of. There was nothing of significant monetary value in the house, but there was a significant library of Jewish and secular books. There were photographs we found stored in large boxes. There were lots of clothes and accessories. There were dishes for milk and for meat, for Passover, for Shabbat, and for every day. There were papers and knickknacks and iconic family photos on the wall. I don't think any of us were prepared to discover the sheer amount of stuff that was there. After all, we had all been in and out of the house many times over the close to 30 years that they lived there. We all thought we knew what was there, but we kept uncovering more photos, more papers, more clothes, more evidence and more mementos of the lives they had lived, lives in which we all figured. For the most part, the grandchildren enjoyed the exercise of going through things, took a couple of them, and left after breakfast or lunch the next day, which was Sunday. As Sunday wore on, the task of going through the house and trying to decide what to take and what to leave became overwhelming. Items in which I had no interest earlier in the day became possible take-withs by the end. The enormity of what we were trying to do actually became quite oppressive. Every item that I picked up or noticed had a question attached to it. Do you want this? Is it worth keeping? Is there someone else in the family who might want it? Should we give it away? Would anyone or any institution or any organization want it? I know that synagogues don't want more books or prayer books or old books. Our synagogues are trying to care for and catalog the books they already have, quite often for congregations of people that aren't particularly interested in them. And they don't want our prayer books that are usually at least 2 or 3 editions older than the prayer books we are currently using. But each item that I picked up was part of them, something they used, read, wore, thought about. Something of one of them lingered in the item. Do I take it? Can I leave it? What is it really? I became paralyzed by the indecision. I knew I had to leave. At some level, I knew this was not about the items in question. It was about my parents and the longing to hold on to them, to something of their essence, their presence, something of what was their existence in the world. I also realized, perhaps not in so many words, but in the far too many hours that it took me to pack up the next day, that their home was their mishkan, their sanctuary, their sacred dwelling. It was not the only home in which they lived, but it was the last one and the one in which they realized and enjoyed the greatest blessings of their lives. Oh, I'm sorry. Give me 1 second, if you would. My father, who was often the rabbi's summer substitute, once wrote a sermon about the first portion of the book of Deuteronomy, a portion entitled Devarim. The portion begins to recapitulate the story of Moses at the top of Mount Sinai, receiving the Torah from God. My father focused on the verse in which God says to Moses, "You have stayed long enough on this mountain," and then instructs Moses to return to the Israelites camped below and continue their journey to the promised land. My father was intrigued by the statement, "You have stayed long enough." on this mountain and asked, how is it possible to stay long enough in God's presence, to stay at the place of one's encounter with the Almighty? How could one ever have enough of the divine effulgence, where the air reverberated with the lingering echoes of the lingering reverberations of God's voice? The answer is that one can never have enough of God's presence, but our lives cannot be lived in such a rarefied atmosphere. Our lives have meaning in the context and the vortex of reality, guided by God's laws, but lived among human beings. I suspect that I could never stay long enough in my parents' house, where their presence lingers and fills the air, or keep enough of their possessions. But that is not where my life is, or where I pray it will continue to unfold. It is hard to leave. I may never again enter that house. It is hard to leave. It is the place where they both took their last breaths, albeit 7.5 years apart. It is hard to leave. Something of them, something of their spirits lingers in the air of that house. But I am bringing something tangible of them back with me in the items from the house. I am bringing something of them back with me in my heart and mind, in my soul and spirit. In truth, I did not have to bring anything back with me, as I have been carrying them with me every day of my life. Let us breathe. Breathe in this day of our lives and its reality, with all of the many pieces and parts and people who play a part of this exact moment of our breathing in and breathing out. Let us breathe in, filling our bodies, and let us breathe out again and release whatever tension has come back in just these last few minutes. I hope you will continue to breathe in and to let go for as long as it feels right to you. But I would share with you this poem by Mary Oliver that speaks to me in this moment. It is entitled In Black Water Woods. Look, the trees are turning their own bodies into pillars of light, are giving off the rich fragrance of cinnamon and fulfillment. The long tapers of cattails are bursting and floating away over the blue shoulders of the ponds. And every pond, no matter what its name is nameless now. Every year, everything I have ever learned in my lifetime leads back to this, the fires and the black river of loss, whose other side is salvation, whose meaning none of us will ever know. Forgive the ringing, I'm so sorry. To live in this world, you must be able to do 3 things: to love what is mortal, to hold it against your bones, knowing your own life depends on it, and when the time comes to let it go, to let it go. I'm sorry, let me do the last stanza again. To live in this world, you must be able to do 3 things: to love what is mortal, to hold it against your bones, knowing your own life depends on it, and when the time comes to let it go, to let it go. Forgive the interruptions at the end. May you have a peaceful week, a week of comforting memories, a week of strength and of health. And I look forward to next time. God bless you. Thank you. Be well.